In the mist-shrouded highlands of Scotland where ancient clans clashed like thunder on the moors, a man rose from the shadows of betrayal and blood. Robert the Bruce, heir to a fractured throne, would carve his name into history not with mercy, but with the edge of a sword. Yet behind the legend of the warrior king lies a ruthless, truth-a tale of ambition that spared no rival, no ally, no sacred ground. Born in 1274 amid the rolling estates of Turnberry Castle on Scotland's rugged Ayrshire coast, Robert Bruce entered a world already torn by conquest. The air carried the salt of the sea and the smoke of English fires, as Edward I of England, the hammer of the Scots, tightened his grip on the northern kingdom. Bruce's grandfather had vied for the Scottish crown after the death of Alexander III in 1286, when a fateful fall from a horse plunged the realm into chaos. The young Robert, tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes sharp as a falcon's, grew up in the courts of privilege, learning the arts of war and diplomacy. But privilege bred rivalry. When John Balliol was crowned king in 1292, backed by Edward's arbitration, the Bruces simmered in resentment. They saw Balliol as a puppet, strings pulled from London. The winds of rebellion stirred in 1296. Edward invaded, sacking Berwick in a massacre that left rivers of blood staining the streets, the screams of 10,000 souls echoing through the borderlands. Balliol abdicated, stripped of his regalia like a beggar in the rain. Robert Bruce, then 22, swore fealty to Edward, his family's lands at stake. He fought alongside the English against his own countrymen. A pragmatic betrayal that saved his estates but stained his honor. Whispers followed him. Opportunist, turncoat. Yet beneath that oath lay a simmering fire. In 1297, as William Wallace ignited the flames of resistance, his broadsword cleaving through English ranks at Stirling Bridge, Bruce watched from afar, calculating. By 1304, Wallace hung drawn and quartered in London, his head spiked on the bridge as a warning. Scotland groaned under Edward's yoke, guardians like John Comyn holding the fragile threads of independence. Comyn, the Red Comyn, Lord of Badenoch, was Bruce's rival, a man of fiery temper and noble blood, descendant of kings. Their paths converged in a pact, a secret alliance to reclaim the throne. But ambition is a double-edged blade. On a chill February day in 1306, within the grey stone sanctity of Greyfriars Church in Dumfries, words turned to steel. An argument erupted over loyalty, over the crown. Bruce, fueled by suspicion that Comyn plotted with the English, drew his dagger. The first thrust pierced flesh. Comyn staggered to the altar, blood pooling on sacred tiles. Bruce's men finished the deed, desecrating the house of God. Excommunication followed swiftly from Pope Clement V. Bruce branded a murderer, his soul damned. Yet in that act of ruthlessness, he seized his destiny. Crowned King Robert I at Scone that March, on the ancient stone of destiny, though Edward had stolen it. Years before, Bruce declared war on fate itself. But glory came at a cost. Edward's fury descended like a storm. Bruce's forces scattered at Methven. His brothers captured and executed Thomas and Alexander, hanged, drawn, and quartered, their heads adorning castle gates. His wife Elizabeth and daughter Marjorie imprisoned in iron cages, exposed to the elements like beasts. Bruce fled to the Hebrides, a fugitive king in his own land, hiding in caves where the drip of water marked time's relentless march. Legend whispers of a spider in one such cavern, weaving its web tirelessly after failure upon failure. Inspired or not, Bruce emerged transformed, a master of guerrilla war. From 1307, he struck like lightning from the hills, raiding English garrisons, burning supplies, his men melting into the mist. He turned Scotland's wild terrain into a weapon, the bogs swallowing armored knights, the forests ambushing convoys. Ruthlessness defined his campaign. He harried his own nobles, who wavered, destroying castles to deny them to the enemy, even those of his kin. At Loudon Hill, he ambushed an English force, rocks tumbling down slopes, axes hacking through the chaos. Edward I, the old hammer, died en route north, his bones boiled and carried as a talisman by his son, Edward II, a weaker king, prone to favorites and folly. The tide turned. Bruce reclaimed the north, executing those who opposed him with grim efficiency. In 1309, he held his first parliament at St. Andrews, forging a kingdom from fragments. But the pinnacle loomed in 1314 at Bannockburn. Edward II marched with 20,000 men-knights in gleaming mail, archers like a forest of boughs intent on relieving Stirling Castle. Bruce, with half the number, chose his ground wisely. Marshy fields flanked by woods, the Bannockburn natural barrier. On the first day, June 23rd, English cavalry charged, only to founder in pits dug by Scottish hands. Bruce himself felled Sir Henry de Bohun in single combat, his battle axe splitting helmet and skull in a spray of blood and bone. The second day dawned with Scottish schiltron's dense formations of pikes, like a porcupine's quill advancing relentlessly. "On them! On them!" the cry rose. English lines buckled, knights trampled in the mud, the burn choked with bodies. Edward fled, his army routed, Scotland's independence roaring back to life. Victory bred boldness. Bruce raided northern England, flames licking York and Carlisle, extracting tribute like a conqueror of old. In 1320, his nobles penned the Declaration of Arbroath, a defiant missive to the Pope, proclaiming that as long as 100 Scots remained alive, they would never submit to English rule. It is not for glory, nor riches, nor honors that we fight, but for freedom alone. It thundered, words that echoed through centuries. Bruce's forces even ventured to Ireland, aiding his brother Edward in a doomed bid for kingship there, a campaign marked by famine and slaughter. Back home, he consolidated power, rewarding loyalists, punishing traitors. The murder of Comyn's kin lingered, a shadow on his reign. But necessity justified all, yet kingship wore on him. By the 1320s, leprosy gnawed at his body-skin lesions spreading, strength fading. He sought peace, negotiating the Treaty of Edinburgh and Northampton in 1328, England recognizing Scottish sovereignty at last. But death came swiftly in 1329 at Cardross, his heart removed as per his wish to be carried on crusade against the infidel. Sir James Douglas bore it south, only to fall in battle at Tiba, the heart hurled into the fray as a final act of defiance. Buried at Dunfermline Abbey, Bruce's remains would later be unearthed, his sternum sawn through a testament to that unfulfilled vow. What drove this man, this king, who danced on the knife's edge of treachery and triumph? Historians debate, was he a pragmatic survivor, adapting to the brutal chessboard of medieval politics, or a ruthless opportunist willing to spill sacred blood for a crown? Contemporaries like the chronicler John of Fordun painted him as a heroic liberator, Scotland's David against England's Goliath. Yet English accounts, such as those in the Lanarkos Chronicle, decried him as a sacrilegious killer, a bandit king. Modern scholars, sifting through charters and battlefields, see a complex figure shaped by feudal loyalties, where oaths bent like reeds in the wind. His ruthlessness was no anomaly. It was the forge of nations. In an era where mercy invited invasion, Bruce's iron will preserved Scotland's soul. His actions rippled outward. Bannockburn inspired generations of resistance, from the Jacobites to modern nationalists. The Declaration of Arbroath, with its proto-democratic fervor, influenced thinkers from Locke to the American founders, a beacon for self-determination. In the end, Robert the Bruce endures not as a saint, but as a symbol of unyielding resolve. From the bloodied altar at Greyfriars to the triumphant fields of Bannockburn, his story reminds us that freedom is often won in shades of grey, where heroes bear the scars of their own ambition. As Scotland's mists still roll over ancient battlegrounds, his legacy whispers, in the face of tyranny, what price would you pay for a nation's heart? For more tales from the forge of history, where kings rise and empires crumble, subscribe now and join us next time as we unravel the enigma of Joan of Arc the Maid, who defied kings and kindled a nation's fire.